Hello everyone, welcome to this new video of clinical concepts in medicine. So today we are going to talk about hepatorenal syndrome. So we are going to study its definition, its diagnostic criteria, how to approach the pathophysiology, and then differences between HRS1 and 2, and finally the management. Okay, so what is the definition of hepatorenal syndrome? So definition is development of renal failure in patients with pre-existing liver disease but without any underlying renal dysfunction. What we mean by this is that there should be a patient with a liver disease who has developed renal failure but his kidneys should be normal. Okay, so a CLD patient who has developed renal dysfunction with normal kidneys will fit in the definition of hepatorenal syndrome. So what is the diagnostic criteria of HRS? So there are major criteria and minor criteria. So in major criteria, the first point is patient must have a CLD or cirrhosis with liver failure symptoms with portal hypertension. Liver failure symptoms like jaundice and encephalopathy. Okay, then patient's serum creatinine should be more than 1.5 milligram per deciliter, or EGFR should be less than 40 ml per minute. Thirdly, there should not be any shock or sepsis. Patient should not be in sepsis or shock. There should not be any history of use of nephrotoxic drugs or diuretics. If there is a history, HRS is out. The diagnosis of HRS is out of question. Next point is that if patient was using diuretics or if we give him an IV volume expansion, there is no improvement in renal function. No improvement in renal function after stopping diuretics or IV volume expansion. And last, there should not be any kidney abnormality, like there should not be any proteinuria, there should not be any hematuria, and ultrasound kidneys is normal. That is, there should not be any structural abnormality of the kidney. So if all these points are fitting in your patient, then the patient can be labeled as hepatorenal syndrome. Now, what are the minor criteria? Minor criteria is urine volume is less than 500 ml in 24 hours. Urine sodium is less than 10 millicoulomb per liter. Urine osmolarity is more than plasma osmolarity. That is, the urine is concentrated. Urine RBCs less than 50 per high power field. Remember, this is less than, because we studied that there should not be any hematuria. And serum sodium less than 130 millicoulomb per liter. However, to make a diagnosis of HRS, all the major criteria are required. All major are required, and minor are only supportive. Minor are only supportive. That is, they support your diagnosis of HRS. Okay. So now, what is the diagnostic approach? How do we approach the patient of HRS? So, approach. So there comes a patient to you with chronic liver disease with renal failure. There is a patient came to you who is having an underlying chronic liver disease with renal failure. So first of all, look for ECF loss, any extracellular fluid loss, like use of diuretics, vomiting, diarrhea, any hemorrhage or bleed, or any sepsis or shock. If any of this is present, then treat the underlying cause. and increase intravascular volume with albumin. Give albumin and increase the intravascular volume. So basically this will fit into the pre-renal AKI. This is not HRS, this is pre-renal AKI. If patient has overuse of diuretics or he is vomiting, diarrhea, hemorrhage, sepsis, shock, then this will fit into the category of pre-renal AKI. Treat the underlying cause, increase the intravascular volume with albumin. If there is no extracellular fluid loss, look for any recent use of nephrotoxic drugs, or look if patient is in sepsis. If any of these conditions fit, if the answer is yes, this fits into the category of renal AKI, and treat accordingly. Treat sepsis with antibiotics and withdraw nephrotoxic drugs. Treat accordingly. Okay. This is renal AKI. If this is also not the condition, if there is no history of use of nephrotoxic drugs or patient is not in sepsis, look for proteinuria or hematuria. If proteinuria or hematuria are present, yes, then it is a glomerular disease. Go for kidney biopsy and treat the underlying cause. Go for kidney biopsy and treat the underlying disease. If even there is no proteinuria, hematuria, go for ultrasound or NCCT KUB, kidney urinary bladder, ultrasound or NCCT KUB. If you find any defect, yes, that is obstructive. If you find any disease or any abnormality, then it is obstructive uropathy, that is post-renal AKI. Post-renal AKI. If still ultrasound NCCT KUB are normal and patient is also having portal hypertension with serum creatinine of more than 1.5, this is HRS. Label the patient as HRS, hepatorenal syndrome. Okay, so you definitely always have to rule out other causes like pre-renal AKI, then rule out renal AKI, then rule out glomerular diseases with proteinuria, hematuria, and then rule out obstructive uropathy. And if everything is absent, patient is having chronic liver disease with liver failure, with portal hypertension, with serum creatinine more than 1.5, label the patient as hepatorenal syndrome. Okay. So now coming on to pathophysiology, how does HRS develop? So basically this is your systemic circulation, this is your liver, okay, and this is your spleen. This is the blood supply to the kidneys. Okay, liver, spleen, kidney, and here is your heart. Okay, so what happens is whenever there is a liver disease, there is an increased pressure in the portal system, that is patient develops portal hypertension. This leads to splanchnic vasodilation, yani that is vasodilation in the spleen, splanchnic vasodilation, which leads to systemic vasodilation. There is splanchnic vasodilation, there is systemic vasodilation, and there is renal vasoconstriction. There is renal vasoconstriction. So the end result is that there is decreased blood flow to kidneys. There is decreased blood flow to kidneys. And whenever there is a decreased blood flow to kidneys in the afferent arteriole, we all know that RAS is activated, renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which further damages the kidneys and forming a vicious cycle. Okay. Now, where does the heart come into play in this? In the initial stages, whenever there is a splanchnic vasodilation and systemic vasodilation, heart compensates by pumping more and more blood. It pumps more and more blood, so it restores the volume and it preserves the renal blood flow. But after some time, heart also decompensates and the compensation provided by the heart is lost, and finally patient lands up into HRS. And patient can also develop cardiomyopathy, cirrhotic cardiomyopathy. Okay, so this is how HRS develops. Now coming on to the clinical features, always remember that patients are mostly going to be the asymptomatic, that is a patient or CLD patient came to you with decompensated CLD, you got serum creatinine levels and you found that they are more than 1.5. Okay, so this is how you most commonly see HRS patients. Then you work up, as we studied earlier, then you work up about HRS in this manner, and then you make the diagnosis of HRS. So patients are mostly asymptomatic. Most common clinical presentation is asymptomatic, followed by decreased urine output. This is the most common. Okay, now so coming on to the differences between HRS type 1 and type 2. So we need to always remember that HRS type 1 is the most dangerous type. This is the most dangerous, most serious type. So basically HRS1, in HRS1 we see doubling of serum creatinine in less than 2 weeks. It progresses very fast, whereas in HRS2 renal impairment is gradually progressive over 1 to 2 months. Okay, so renal functions worsen over 1 to 2 months in HRS type 2. Secondly, in HRS type 1 there is always a precipitating event present, and most commonly it is spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, SBP. However, in HRS2 there are no precipitating events. In HRS1 there is no history of any diuretic resistant ascites. What do you mean by diuretic resistant ascites? That patient has ascites and you are giving him diuretics in maximum dose. Okay, you are giving him diuretics including furosemide and spironolactone agonist like aldactone. In maximum doses. Despite that, patient's ascites is not improving, then you label it as diuretic resistant ascites. In HRS there is no such history, while in HRS there is always a history of ascites which is diuretic resistance ascites. And as we discussed earlier, HRS1 is the most serious type, so the survival is very low in HRS type 1. However, median survival in HRS type 2 is of 6 months. Okay, coming on to the management, how to manage HRS. How do we manage HRS? Management. So for management of HRS, first of all we'll look at the medical management. We have to constantly measure the BP, the central venous pulse and the urine output of the patient. Constant monitoring is required. Okay. Second thing is start with antibiotics. Why antibiotics are required? Because spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, SBP, is a very common risk factor for HRS. Okay, so in generally third generation cephalosporins will work fine. Like you can give injection taxim, that is cefotaxim 1 gram 8 hourly IV, or also you can use injection monoseph, that is ceftriaxone 1 gram 12 hourly. If patient is in severe sepsis or shock, you can step up the antibiotics to Tazact, that is piperacillin tazobactam, or even meropenem plus teicoplanin, depending on the patient's decision. It is a physician's decision. Depending on patient's condition, you can use specific antibiotics. Second thing you need to do is you need to give drugs which will cause splanchnic vasoconstriction and renal vasodilation. Okay, so you can use terlipressin for this purpose in the dose of 1 milligram 4 to 6 hourly IV. You can also use octreotide. If a patient is a cardiac patient, avoid terlipressin. If ECG changes are present or patient also has some cardiac abnormality, avoid terlipressin and go for octreotide in the dose of 100 microgram 8 hourly IV. And you can also use midodrine 2.5 mg thrice daily and which can be increased up to 12.5 mg. You can increase the dose up to 12.5 mg, commonly available as by the name of Gutron, Midodrine. Okay, now next you are going to use albumin. Albumin is used to basically increase the intravascular volume so that the renal blood flow is preserved. Now albumin is used in the dose of 1 gram per kg. Apart from this, you can also use inotropes like norepinephrine to increase the mean arterial pressure and increase the blood supply to the renal system. Okay, so this is the medical management of HRS. You can also go for surgical management. If you need to go for surgical management, you have two options available. The first option is TIPS. Transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunt. TIPS, transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunt. Okay, and finally, ultimate treatment is liver transplant, surgical treatment, and the final most treatment that can save the patient is liver transplant. Okay, liver transplant will save the patient. For prevention of development of HRS, how can you prevent HRS in a CLD patient? So one of the approved drugs is pentoxifylline. It comes under the name of Prental. You can give 400 mg thrice daily, 400 mg TDS, and Norflox tablet, norfloxacin, 400 mg once daily. These two drugs can be used for prevention of HRS. But always remember, once patient lands up into HRS, then mortality is always high. HRS is equal to high mortality. Always remember that. So counsel the patients accordingly. So I hope you like this video on HRS. Thank you so much.